Good evening, everyone. I'm Riley King, and happy Saturday evening, May 30th, 2020. Welcome to the Saturday evening edition of the Riley King Newscast, right here on the Riley King Network. Let's begin. We have a lot of news to get to this Saturday evening, so let's get started. First up, COVID-19 in New Hampshire, what you need to know information. Let's take a look at that right now. And here is a look at that COVID-19 in New Hampshire information. There are 4,492 number of people in New Hampshire who have tested positive for COVID-19. 1,768,461 number of people in the United States who have tested positive. 238 number of deaths from COVID-19 in New Hampshire. 440 number of people who have been hospitalized with COVID-19 in New Hampshire. And 330 number of deaths from COVID-19 in the United States. This map of New Hampshire right here shows you where current cases of COVID-19 are. Manchester, 443. Sorry about that. And this map of New Hampshire right here shows you where total cases of COVID-19 are. Manchester, 1141. Now let's take a look at these three charts here. Let's start with the first chart. New cases each day in New Hampshire. In the purple, daily new positive COVID-19 cases. In the orange, new hospitalizations. And in the red are the deaths. Let's take a look at this chart here. Current cases. In the purple, total current COVID-19 cases. And in the orange, current hospitalizations. Let's take a look at this chart here. Total cases. The purple, total positive COVID-19 cases. In the orange, total hospitalizations, deaths, red and blue, recovered. Now let's take a look at these charts here. Age group of cases, female and male of cases, and risk information. And now let's take a look at this chart here. Race/ethnicity of cases, hospitalizations, deaths, and percent of New Hampshire population. And your common symptoms: fever, lack of smell, cough, chills, and difficult breathing. How it spreads, and prevention tips. And be sure to stay with the Riley King Network for the latest of your COVID-19 information. Several hundred march in Manchester to protest death of George Floyd. Two taken into custody after altercation with protesters who gathered later outside police station. Take a look at this photo. This photo was in downtown Manchester today. The protesters marched along Elm Street. Several hundred people marched in downtown Manchester on Saturday morning, calling for justice in the wake of the death of George Floyd, a black man who died in Minneapolis this week after a white police officer pinned Floyd's neck with his knee. The march began at Veterans Park, continued along Elm Street, and ended back at the park. Police shut down Elm Street and Chestnut Streets for the march. Protesters chanted "Black Lives Matter" and "Hands Up, Don't Shoot." "We're losing black lives constantly to police brutality," and racism constantly. It's not one incident. It's not two incidents. It's constant, and we're exhausted, said one of the protesters' organizer. While violence has erupted elsewhere in the U.S., the protest in Manchester was peaceful. Some protesters said they're afraid people of color in every city could be targeted. Things haven't escalated to where they have in other places like Minneapolis, Ferguson, Baltimore quite yet. But we understand, we know that if things keep going along this path that they are going along here, then we could easily end up the next Minneapolis. We could easily end up the next hashtag, said another organizer. We're trying to be as peaceful as we can, but we're tired. We're tired of seeing our black brothers and sisters being killed seamlessly, added another organizer. Organizers said they're demanding justice, not just for Floyd. Everybody needs to come together and support us, support our movement, support Black Lives Matter. We don't want to hear all lives matter. We want to hear Black Lives Matter, said another organizer. In a statement, Governor Chris Sununu said this morning, I called the organizers ahead of the George Floyd March in Manchester to let them know the state of New Hampshire stands with them in their calls for justice. This important conversation must continue, and we must constructively work together as a nation to ensure there is change. After the protest, a small group marched to the Manchester Police Department. About 1:30 p.m., police said a truck drove up and the people inside got into an argument with protesters. In a nearby parking lot, a person in the truck got out and displayed a gun, police said. That person was taken into custody, as was someone else, police said. New York rolls out roadmap for reopening the city. Let's take a listen to that video from ABC News.
All of this as the country tries to reopen amid this pandemic, fully aware of the risks. Tonight, New York City is starting to reopen, so how this will work. And the CDC with a new and alarming projection now about where the death toll could go in the weeks ahead. Tonight, more than 102,000 American lives lost now. Health officials now predicting that number will soar beyond 115,000 by June 20th. And if you had summer plans with the family, tonight the CDC out with new and important guidance. And Eva Pilgrim has it.
Tonight, New York rolling out its roadmap for reopening the city.
Reopening to a new normal. It's a safer normal. People will be wearing masks. People will be socially distanced.
Starting June 8th, stores can reopen for curbside pickup, along with non-essential construction and manufacturing. Up to 400,000 workers could be back on the job.
We're trying to get the subways and buses to be as clean and safe as possible in a really, really imperfect situation.
In Boston, where offices are starting to reopen on Tuesday, trains and buses disinfected. The number of riders will be limited.
I think it's a real concern. I don't know how how they're gonna implement certain things, but I think they should, because I'm always smushed next to people.
In Los Angeles County today, a green light for hair salons and restaurants to reopen with limited in-person dining, effective immediately.
This is like the honor system because we're all in this together. Many Americans now looking to travel safely this summer. RV sales and rentals soaring.
Who knows what the new normal is going to be, and we feel we'll be safe and sound. We'll only have to get out to get gas.
The CDC now out with guidance for summer travel, cautioning road trips come with risks because of stops along the way. For travel on planes, trains, and buses, a challenge for social distancing. And for those staying at campgrounds, risks at picnic areas and on trails. The CDC adding staying home is the best way to protect yourself and others from getting sick. Tonight, a new projection the death toll could pass 115,000 by June 20th. Cases of the virus rising in 14 states, hotspots flaring in places like Montgomery, Alabama.
Our hospitals are just flooded with coronavirus patients, in particular in the intensive care units. Every day, our unit beds are full at all our hospitals we go to.
And the CDC now saying they think community spread here in the U.S. began in late January or early February. The virus initially coming from China and later from Europe. David.
Eva Pilgrim, our thanks to you all.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. And thank you for joining us for this evening edition of the Riley King Newscast right here on the Riley King Network. Have a great rest of your Saturday evening, and I'll see you back here tomorrow for another newscast. And I'll have a news report coming up in a little bit. Good night and bye, everyone.